Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savage Reads, and today I am back with my last video of 2020 and one of my favourite videos to make. In fact, this time on YouTube is kind of one of my favourite times, full stop, as it's when people do all their favourites, of which this will be my favourite fiction books of 2020, all 15 of them. And also then they start doing videos about what they're excited about for next year and all those kind of things, which I will be doing over the weekend coming. So before I go on to the 15 books that I want to talk to you about, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone and anyone who has watched this channel this year, who has commented, who has liked, who has sent messages on other social media. And you know, it's been a really, well, it's almost like I hate saying this now, it's been a real year, but it has. And I just want to let you know that it's really appreciated, because lots of you said thank you for the content I've created, but I just wanted to know, like, it's a mutual thing and it's reciprocated, because when I was shielding, particularly in the summer, the community on here and on my other socials, which I'll link down below, was just so helpful, and like making videos and stuff gave me focus and routine and all those kind of things, which I really needed. So huge thank you to you all, and I hope you have a wonderful New Year's Eve, and I hope 2021 is better and brighter for all of us. Right, let's get on with these books then. So I have done them in order, although I would say it's kind of the top 4 that would never shift. The others sort of could move around on any given day. And I'm going to start with Charlotte Wood's The Weekend, which I actually read on my birthday this year as I turned 38. And this is all about 3 friends who are going back to their mutual friend, her house, to clear it out after she has died. It's set over Christmas, which in Australia is really sunny. Charlotte Wood's an Australian author, and this is set in Australia. And this book looks at the ways friendships are built and how sometimes there can be one person that glues everyone together, and what happens when that glue is gone, and the fractures that show and what's left behind, and how people deal with grief. But also this book is really about how, as people get older, their wants and desires and dreams don't change. Like, it's not something that sort of shifts. And I loved that insight. And also, but at the same time, there's sort of like this nostalgia for the life that's gone, or their life that's gone so far, and also the memories that they have, but also watching the next generations coming up behind them. And I just loved all of that. So this I thought was fabulous. And there's a brilliant dog in this book that I don't normally like animals in books, but I really enjoyed that. And I just think Charlotte Wood's a brilliant writer. It's very different from the first book of hers that I read, which is The Natural Way of Things, which was one of my favorite books a few years ago, which is kind of a very angry dystopic. This is not angry necessarily, but it's just sort of, there's a wryness and a slight cynicism, but so much hope and love in it all at once, if that makes sense. Anyway, really loved this, as I did Jacqueline Woodson's Red at the Bone. And I so wish this has gotten to the shortlist of the Women's Prize this year, because I just thought it was so good. It's a really compact novel and a lot happens here. It's based around Melody and her sort of coming out party, as it were. And what we then do is we go back through the generations in time through Melody's family at pivotal points, all the way back to 1921 and to a really difficult part of American history for Black people, which I did not know very much about, and was kind of just like when I read it. I loved this. I thought she did so much in so shorter time, and I think that's really powerful when authors can literally, like, the characters all came off the page fully formed, all of their complexities and everything. I love the fact that a whole spectrum of life is covered in this book, and yeah, I just can't recommend it enough. It really kind of haunted me for a while, actually, is how I want to put it. So yeah, phenomenal. Speaking of haunting and going sort of in that direction with witchcraft, really, is The Mercies by Kieran Millward Hargrave. And I thought this was phenomenal. I didn't get to talk about this book as much as I would have liked to in 2020, because it was submitted for a prize I was judging, and then we realised that it wasn't eligible. But at the time, I couldn't talk about it that much. I did do an Instagram live with Kieran, and any Instagram lives, and actually I did one with Charlotte Wood. So any of those that I've got, I will link down below if I can find them. Some of them saved, some of them didn't. 2020. So anyway, going back to this book is based on true historical events that happened in now I'm rubbish with names, I'm rubbish with dates. I want to say 1600s, 1617 on Christmas Eve, where there was a storm and all the men from the island of Varja perished, and so the island was left to be run by women. And we meet one particular woman, Marin, who, along with others, kind of after the grief has settled, as it were, well, not even settled, but after the numbness of grief has worn off and they realise they need to survive, starts to try and make the community work. However, there is, well, news of what's happening on the island spreads, and then Absalom Cornet arrives with his wife Ursa, and he is one of the best villains I've read, or like you will detest him, to kind of sort things out. And actually it leads to witch trials. Now, you know that from the off, and what I loved, not only what I loved about this book in the fact that it was so beautifully written, like you felt that Kim was really passionate about telling the stories of these people who have been, well, ended up in such a tragedy. But even though you know the outcome of the book, you're still hoping the whole time and believing it might change, which is just amazing. And also the characters are so beautifully drawn, and there is a love story in here that I absolutely loved it. So yeah, would really, really recommend. I also read The Way Past Winter towards the end of the year by Kieran Ward Hargreave, and next year I just want to read everything of hers that I've not read before because it's so good. And I should mention, actually, I didn't on either my favourite fiction list today or my favourite non-fiction yesterday, which I'll link down below, allow an author to be on there more than once, which could have easily happened. So I have done honourable mentions on my Patreon, which is always linked down below if you want more. Then we have Real Life by Brandon Taylor, which I had a really funny relationship. Well, it's not funny, haha, but I had an interesting, although I think interesting is a word I overuse. I had an unusual relationship with this book because I started reading this as a buddy read with Mercedes, and we both read the first chapter and we were both sharing like how much we enjoyed it and like how brilliant the writing was and all those things. And then we sort of both just sort of put it down, and I sort of just left it for quite a while before then. But you know, I think it's because I found the writing that whole chapter was so perfect. It's almost like I didn't want to stray away from it in some weird way. Anyway, when I did, because I got to interview Brandon for the Booker and for Waterstones, I carried on, and it really enveloped me and it really made me think. And it's a book. It's an account basically of a man called Wallace. Sorry, I should tell you what it's about. Who, although I feel like lots of people will know what this is about, but it's about a young man called Wallace who is a black queer student in a predominantly white part of America. He's found out his father has died. He hasn't told his friends, one of whom Millie has a kind of very complex relationship with, as we discover. And it's what happens to him and his friends over one weekend. And it looks at race in America, it looks at class, it looks at grief, it looks at all sorts of, well, it looks at in fact, actually, I think that's one of the themes with what I've been reading this year that's really chimed with me, is books about the complexities of friendships, books about grief, and books about otherness. And this is a book that covers all of those things and does it superbly. Then we have another theme that has come up with books that I've really, really enjoyed this year is sisters, or siblings actually. And The Vanishing Heart by Britt Bennett is a book about two sisters, Desiree and Stella. They come from sort of this place called Mallard, which has a really interesting history with race and the different tones of your skin. And the two sisters, one is darker skinned and one is lighter skinned, and they run away, and it's how their lives take on totally different paths when one of the sisters passes as white and sort of almost denies their history and sort of blocks it out and tries to make a life for themselves from that. And what I love about this book as well is not only is that a really fascinating look at, well, social commentary, history, all those things, we then go through lots of different generations with the family, and there's a wonderful one of their daughters is one of my favourite characters of the whole year. I thought this was phenomenal. I have The Mothers to read. I was going to try and read that this year and I haven't yet, which is Britt Bennett's first book, but I'm hoping to in due course. So that was fab. Another book that I didn't really talk about that much this year, but I certainly thought about a lot, and is one that I think I would like to have loads of discussion about, because I loved it, but I can imagine there are reasons why some people may not with the subject matter. And that is Here is the Beehive by Sarah Crossan, which is about Anna, who has been having an affair with a married man called Connor for quite some time, and he tragically dies. And this whole book is about, what do you do when you were in love with someone and had a relationship with someone, they die, but nobody knew about that relationship, so you really have no one to talk to. And it's written, I should show you, in verse. The emotion in this is just incredible. And the reason I say some people might not like this book is because I think that affairs are still kind of, well, they're either really glamorized, or they are, and this doesn't glamorize affairs at all, but they're also sort of, I don't know, really looked down upon. Now, I'm not saying that people should go around and have affairs left, right and centre, but I do believe affairs happen for a reason. And also, I do believe that love can come in all different shapes and sizes and complexities and trysts and all those kind of things. And I think this book sort of looks at that. So yeah, I just thought that this was fantastic. So highly, highly recommended. I really want to read all of her YA now. Then one of my favourite books of not last year, was it the year before? All of the years before this one feel like time's gone so bizarre I can't work out when they were, but was Flames by Robbie Arno, and The Rain Heron I read this year and absolutely loved again. This is very different. This is set in a sort of almost future, where and actually this book is kind of about, well, it's not kind of, it is about climate change and the effect that we are having on the climate as humans and nature, and how nature kind of can take its revenge, or probably should take its revenge, is really what I think this book is actually about. But the Rain Heron is a mythical creature. It's a creature that a woman called Wren saw in her childhood and has been trying to find again, living off the grid. However, people have heard of the Rain Heron, they want to capture it for its powers, and that's kind of, the soldiers come to try and find it, and that's one part of the story. There's another part of the story which deals with the most creepy, brilliant writing I've ever read about octopuses. Do you call them octopuses or octopi? Please let me know in the comments down below. But this book is just so, this book is so much about, don't know why I said that twice, but this book is so much about the power and the magic of nature, and how we don't always see how magical it is and fantastical it is. And I love that Robbie Arno embraces sort of the mythology around creatures and their magnificence and their magic, and does such incredible fiction with it. So yeah, would highly, I'd highly recommend all of these books. Now, this next book is the second in a series, and I would definitely say read both of them. I read them back to back, which I rarely ever do, but that's how brilliant they were. This is Heaven My Home by Attica Locke, and this is the second in her Highway, I want to say 69, that's not correct, series. But it's about Ranger Darren Matthews, who is a Texan Ranger, a black Texan Ranger, in a place where race is such a hot topic and such a contentious point, and so tricky, because you know you have some incredibly racist people there and a large black population, but also the history of slavery, which this book looks at. And this is about a young boy called Levi King who goes missing, and Darren has to look into it, and it turns out that, well, you know this a little bit from the first book, but you could read this as standalone, definitely. But Levi's father is kind of the head of the Aryan Brotherhood, who are one of the most racist groups / cults in Texas and possibly in America. And it's how he has to, therefore, because he is there as part of the law, and how the law has to look after everyone. And the way Attica Locke deals with this is so brilliant. There's no, like, there is good and bad, yet there's no moralistic tone, yet they're sort of, how can I put it? The characters live and breathe no matter how awful they are. And there's one particular matriarch in this book that you will never forget. So I want to read much more Attica Locke next year. And actually one thing that I really want to do is try and go back where I can, where they're not debut novels in this list, and read at least one book by all of these authors within the first 6 months of next year. That's kind of one of the things. Oh, I'm giving away my plans for 2021. Anyway, then we have Sisters by Daisy Johnson, another book that I don't feel like I've talked about really that much. And I think that's partly because I didn't do wrap-ups between August and December. But if you'd like to see me talk about all of those books, I will link that video down below too. Anyway, this is about July and September. And when we meet them, their mother is driving them away from their home where something has happened at the school that has meant they've had to leave. What that is remains a mystery for quite a while. But you know, the way Daisy Johnson writes brooding atmospheres and has this gorgeous, glorious, gritty, gothic nature to their writing, particularly with this book. I mean, it was in Fen, her short stories, less so in Everything Under. But anyway, the book also looks at how these sisters have almost a far too intense relationship, which is starting to separate. July feels that September is sort of moving away from her, and that is looked at and things get twisty, and that is all I will say. But I really, 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 really loved this, and this book is one that I've thought about more and more and more since I've read it. Because sometimes, you know, you read a book and it's like that instant and you can't stop thinking about it, and this book did that, but it's really sort of stayed and played with my brain ever since. So yeah, would highly recommend. I feel like, I think I said this in my non-fiction book, you should all take a shot of fizzy pop or something more alcoholic if you wish every time I say highly recommended, because of course all of these books are. Then we have Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud, and I instantly smile when I talk about this book, because whilst there is some very difficult subject matter dealt with within these pages, the overall feeling of joy that I have around particularly Betty and Mr. Chatan in this book, this book's had that effect on me. So, as I mentioned, this is about Betty Ramadan, who her husband has died. And actually, when we first meet her, we're in the past and we see their relationship and how awful it is. He's died, she's left looking after her son solo, and they take in a lodger, Mr. Chetan. And this sort of unconventional family is formed, and we follow them up to a point where there is a night that's absolutely devastating because things are revealed that change everything. And yeah, I just loved it. I love how the sort of smells and the flavors and everything that this book has within it really comes to the fore. They're also joyous. How it looks at how people who are other are treated, how it looks at love in all of its different forms, how it looks at sexuality, particularly as you get older. Actually, I really, really love that about it. And yeah, I just thought it was phenomenal. So I think we're at our top 5, and I have to say, on a different day, this could be number 5, not number 6. But today, at number 5, is another book that I didn't really talk about, although I did do an event with the author for Waterstones on Instagram and also interviewed them for Scarlet's Book Club Live, and that is Sugibane by Douglas Stewart. I can't say Shuggy right, I don't think. It's supposed to be like huggy, shuggy, but I just can't do it. Anyway, this is set in Thatcher's Scotland, in Glasgow. A really horrific time for, well, I think the country and the world personally, but anyway. And we meet Shuggy, who has had this incredibly close relationship with his mother, and we go back to that. Now, interestingly, his mother Agnes, I think this whole book could have actually been called Agnes Bane, because it's as much about her as it is him, and the relationship that they have together, where Agnes becomes an alcoholic for various reasons that we discover as we read through the book, and various traumas that she goes through. But it's how this bond between them is kind of unrelenting even when things are horrific, and the love between the two of them. And I just found that so powerful. I am normally somebody who moans about how, all books with the main queer character are generally blinking miserable, and this is miserable, and it is hard to read, and it can at some points be incredibly bleak, but yet there is just this hope that glimmers, even in the darkest moments. There's just a glimmer or a shimmer of hope within the book. And I think it's a phenomenal debut, and I was well chuffed that it won the book fair. So, a book actually though that I would have been as chuffed, possibly more chuffed, I don't know, it depends on the day, if it had won the Booker and I got shortlisted for the Booker, is How Much of These Hills Is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. Now, I have to really thank Elizabeth McNeil for making me read this, because I looked at it. One, you know, any of you who followed me since my blog began will know I have an issue with horses. It's just a thing. So initially the cover put me off. The fact that it was a country and western also put me off. But Elizabeth said to me, I think you'll love this book. Give it a couple of chapters and see how you go. Read a couple of chapters, then suddenly I'd read 2/3 of the book and I couldn't put it down. I read it over one weekend and I just thought it was phenomenal. It tells of, I think it's Lucy, I want to say Lucy and Sam. Yes, Lucy and Sam, who at the beginning of the book, quite a grim start, are carrying the body of their father with them, along with their horse, just to mention there is a horse. And this book does something incredible because the book is kind of about family. It's also a look at immigration, because the family, Lucy and some of them are in part are of Chinese descent, and it rewrites the history of the gold rush era, basically, with also this slight element of mythology in the background. But what this book did that I loved was, I don't want to say it's twisty and turny, but this book continually surprised me, both with its plot, also with its structure, which I think is brilliant, because you meet these siblings as they're trying to find somewhere to basically create a new home after both their parents are dead and survive. You then go back to when it was them and their parents and how that scenario was, and then you go back to when their parents met before coming all the way around again. And there's a real thread here, and I don't want to spoil anything, of the inheriting some of the things your parents have been through, and therefore the expectation upon you for that, or from that this book looks at absolutely phenomenally. So yeah, and it's slight, but it really packs a punch, and yeah, Blinking loved it. At number 3 we have, and I will say these 4 don't change, they would always be my top 4, and number 1 would always be number 1. The other 3 might move around a little bit, but the others would shift around depending on the day. So at number 3 is The Bass Rock by Evie Wilde, which I think should have been on way more award lists than it has been. Like, why was it not on the Women's Prize? Why was it not on the Booker? What the fucker is going on, frankly, I say. Anyway, this book is told through the eyes of 3 different women, and it kind of, it's a book about how they interlink, I guess. It also looks at kind of witchiness, I would say, which may appeal to quite a lot of you. But in the present day, we have Viv, who is dealing with grief and is dealing with sort of feeling lost in her life, and who goes back to stay at her aunt's house and sort things out, lots of sorts. We then have Ruth, who is in post-war Britain, where she's got married. She is her husband's second wife, and things in the house she lives in are not right, and there are things in the marriage that aren't right, and they almost mirror each other in some ways. And there's possibly a ghostly presence there. It's, yeah, all the things that I love, basically. Gothic, delightful, delicious, can't get enough. And then we also have Sarah, who is on the run as she's been accused of being a witch in the 1700s. And it's how all of these tell, one, this interlinking story in some way, but also how it's a book really that's all about women being vilified as witches when they've chosen to speak out or dare to be different or anything like that. And I just thought it was incredible. And like I said, it should have been on all of the shortlists it could be eligible for, frankly. I'm quite miffed off that it isn't. But it's in my top 3. So, I don't know, that feels like a slight booby prize. I'm really sorry, Evie, if you see this. But I'm not sorry, because I bloody loved it, and it's number 3, but you know what I mean. It's not like it's winning 10 grand or whatever. Anyway, I think it is phenomenal. Then, penultimately, out of my list, number 2 is Akwaeke Emeze's The Death of Vivek Oji. And I feel like I have to do a deep breath for this, and indeed the last book of the year, because these took me on really emotional journeys, and I don't want to, because this one is quite slight, I don't want to spoil anything for this, because that is part of the power, is not knowing too much as you go into this book. I think it has this huge effect on you. Anyway, as the book starts, we know that Vivek has died, and their body has been left out in the street, and there is a mystery surrounding it, and what happened to Vivek and how their body ended up there. We then go back in time, sort of here and there, through mainly Vivek's cousin Sita, and learn of how Vivek went against the traditions of culture and family and all those things, and was quite different, and how they how everyone dealt with that in lots of different ways. There's also a really, and I'm feeling emotional thinking about it, beautiful, possibly slightly controversial for some people, but I thought it was beautiful, love story in here. And I just think Akwaeke Emeze, I just think they are a phenomenal writer. Like, I read Pet by them as well this year, and I blinking loved that, and that's in my honourable mentions, just give one away. But yeah, I cannot wait to see what they do next. I think it's going to be poetry, but I can't wait for another novel, because this was just phenomenal. So it would have to be like an absolutely incredible, amazing book that could stop that from being number one, frankly. And I will say there is another book that I've read this year that could have potentially topped this off, but I decided not to talk about any books that are out in 2021 until 2021, and I'm going to be rereading it because I'm doing an event with the author. Sorry, my throat was very dry. So yeah, I'll leave that as a bit of a mystery, and you'll find out more about that early in the new year. But this will be probably no surprise to absolutely anyone who's watched this channel at all this year. My book of 2020 is Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell. I thought this was an absolute masterpiece. Which actually I would say the top 6 books all are for me this year. Like, as top 6 books go, I don't think I've ever read such a strong amount of content. I don't know if that's because I choose the books that I think I like as much. I don't know. I also should say, actually, I've not listed in my top favourite books any books that were part of prizes I judged. I didn't think that was fair to do. So anyway, blah. Hamlet. So, and in case you have not heard about Hamlet, which I find very unlikely, it is the tale of Hamlet, Shakespeare's son. However, Shakespeare is never named in the book, and it's about, his death and the plague, and which feels very relevant this year, and how it supposedly inspired Hamlet. But really, this book is about a mother and son, because he's just called the writer, or the tutor, or the father. It's about his wife, Agnes, who is an otherly woman and is probably one of my favourite characters in fiction ever. Like, I literally love her. I absolutely love her. And she is quite otherly. She's very one with nature, like to a slightly magical level. It's about how much she loves her children, and when Hamlet's twin becomes sick, how everything changes, but then, well, things change, as you know. And what I love about this book, and what still makes me feel incredibly emotional every time I talk about it, one, the writing is so beautiful, like so beautiful. I mean, I've read a lot of Maggie O'Farrell. I've been a fan of hers for years, and this to me was like next level. You can tell this is something she has been thinking about and sort of going over in her mind and creating for years. It's so beautiful. The love in the writing, but also the writing so beautiful. The writing made me cry, but the way she writes about love in such a pure, beautiful, I'm saying beautiful a lot, form, also made me cry, and is doubly powerful when the moment of grief comes, and how grief takes over as an emotion. That I have never, ever read anything like this before, ever. And that's why it's my book of the year, and I think will be, well, it's going straight into like my books of all time list, basically, because that's how brilliant I think it is, as may some of the top 6 that I've mentioned. But this is the book that I just, I haven't stopped thinking about it all year. I don't know if that's also because of pandemics, plagues, grief, love, all those things. I don't know. But yeah, I just think it is utterly, utterly incredible. And I want you to go away and read all 15 of these books, which will be linked down below. But like, if you haven't read this yet, get to it. And, you know, if you don't like it, that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to cry because I've cried enough over this book. No, but I think it is a masterpiece. So there we go. So that is my last video for 2020. I wish you all a very, very happy new year. I know that seems quite odd with everything going on in the bin fire of 2020, but here's to a brighter and better 2021. Thank you again so much for watching this channel, for commenting, for liking, for interacting in all the different ways that you do. It has really, really, really meant a lot to me in a very difficult year. But I don't want to dwell on that. I'm going to talk probably in the next videos about plans for next year and reflecting on this year a little bit in a weirdly positive way, because I feel like I've just got to, as it hits midnight tonight, I've just got to let go of all of the of 2020 and just think about, actually, there have been moments that have been brilliant in 2020. As odd as that sounds, it is true. And I think we need to look at those glimmers of hope. I was talking about glimmers and shimmers of hope in dark times earlier, and I think that's what we need to do with 2020, if we can. No pressure. Like, if you just want to hide under a duvet for the next however long, that's totally understandable. You know, we all just need to actually say well done for getting through it. So on that note, I will leave you now, and I wish you all, like I said, a better and brighter 2021, and hopefully we'll have lots of reading adventures and chats and all sorts of things along the way. I will see you soon. Bye.